All right, welcome everyone to the RSP Film Room. We are episode number 115, and this is the second time that I have had Dan Hatman on, but the first time you're going to see this show because my bumbling ass didn't know how to use a microphone very well. And Dan and Matt Harmon are two shows that I very much loved having that I bumbled to the point that we're going to have to retape, and we're getting to retape this one with Dan. And Dan is, if you don't know Dan, you should follow him on Twitter. You're going to see his you're going to see his Twitter handle down below here throughout the episode. He is with the Scouting Academy. He is the co-founder. He's the founder of the Scouting Academy. You have and we're gonna joke for the half of our friends at ITP that he's also an integral part, along with 40 other people who do wonderful work with the ITP draft guide. I would definitely recommend checking out ITP, the Scouting Academy, Dan Hatman's work on Twitter, and the draft guide. Dan, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, it's going to be great. We're going to get a chance to watch a player who Dan did an excellent job of, but there is no sound of him doing that excellent job from before, and that's one Haason Reddick. So why are we watching Haason Reddick?
This is a player that had piqued my interest because I don't get a chance to start the college players until Senior Bowl. The work we do with the academy, and then my work just during the fall keeps me pretty NFL focused. And then going to Mobile, all right, here we flip the switch and let's get into the college process. And this is an individual who, much like he is going to be asked to do in the NFL, all right, we're going to take you from playing the edge. Now you need to be a stacked backer. Here you go. Here's practice. Get after it. Team 9-on-7, pass rush drills, coverage, the whole 9 yards. And I just thought for being in that setting, for someone who was a walk-on corner, from my understanding, that's built himself into where he's at now, I just thought he did a heck of a job down there in Mobile surviving that week, and which really drove me to want to watch his tape, spend some time with around him. And he's one of these guys talked about in the mid-teens of the first round, for teams that may need someone in the front seven, whether they may be looking for someone on the edge or as a stacked backer, and just really intriguing to watch and see how he plays the game.
Well, this is going to be great because if you're new to the RSP Film Room, then what you're going to find here is it's two guys watching tape, talking about concepts, talking about technique, athletic ability, for the position or in football in general. And we're going to do this centering around Reddick. And Dan has graciously looked into a number of plays and provided 11 of them for us to look at today. We're going to look at them in slow motion and just discuss some of the things that I ask our guests to discuss, which is all those concepts I just mentioned in a minute ago. So we're going to get this started. We're going to make sure that we can both see the screen and get that shared. And we are about to roll. How's that look?
Looks good.
All right, then let me see if we can get it onto full screen. Can we do that? Yeah, there we go. All right. So here's our first play. You can see, I believe Riddick's at the top of the screen, right?
Yeah, and we're looking at how he, particularly how he gets off the ball in this particular instance. So he is at the top of the screen. He's the edge rusher. He's coming out of a low stance here, being that it's 1st and 15. It's not necessarily clear pass for most offenses here. So you can see how his butt's a little further down, but you see how even in that, which is not an advantageous stance, if you think about it, a track athlete lining up in the blocks, they're going to have their rear higher up in the air. He's at flat backed. If in a little later in the play, it looks like he sinks even more, making sure his eyes are up where he can get his keys. So him to come out of that position and then immediately start gaining ground like he does is an excellent thing. He sees his blocker step up to an interior player. He's getting someone out of the backfield to come and attack him. And then now we're looking at, what does he do after that point in terms of how does his burst threaten blockers?
And pretty nice.
Now, this is one of those times where the burst is about all I feel like we can capture here. The nature of how this blocker stops his feet right here. And you see how he becomes a gate, the blocker himself. This is
Yes.
not going to be a typical NFL pass pro rep in terms of how this person engaged. So the finish of the play is less predictive because that's not how most NFL blockers are going to engage him. Blocker steps inside, is late to react outside, opens the gate. The second blocker has to come. You get to see the true finish of the play for Reddick is how he his competitiveness, his motor continues to push in these situations. This is a man that's not to be deterred when he's getting after it.
Yeah, and I love how you bring up how the blocker performs here and comparing that to what you'd see with the NFL lens, because that's so much about what you're doing when you're evaluating college players is projecting them to the next level, and you have to look at the current environment that he's in on a given play or game compared to what you will likely see based on studies of the NFL tape.
Absolutely.
So we'll look at that one more time. And there we go. Very nicely done. So let's look at our next. We're going to see him once again at the top of the screen in the 2-point stance.
So this is one of those other things about him. Players that we talk about projecting to the 2-point stance, the outside backer position, it can look different in terms of get off. Some players are not as explosive when they're not in that coiled 3-point stance. The 2-point stance requires a little bit more lower body explosive ability because you're not as coiled. You know, you think about taking a spring and elongating it. This is a more elongated stance opposed to being a compact 3-point stance. So to see someone continue to gain ground here. Now, the nice thing about this play is actually less about the upfield burst. He's clearly attacking that upfield shoulder, but it's his vision to the quarterback and his awareness of what's happening around him. He doesn't feel that tackle continue to engage. You can see 72, he's a gone, right? Because this is a screenplay. So his blocker doesn't stay engaged. He recognizes it's never that easy. You know, you never just completely run by the guy that quickly. So when you get that slap on the backer, they disengage that quickly. There's something amiss here. Now he's got his eyes directly on the quarterback, and it's instead of continuing to attack with a low body posture like he's a pass rusher here, you start to see him get tall, get long, because he's going to get vertical and he's going to attempt to deflect this pass. So that awareness to me kind of spoke to how he sees and understands the game and how he's been taking coaching. You're not born with that. You know, the idea that if a tackle leaves and you're now a free rusher, that something's amiss, you don't walk out of the womb with that. Someone had to coach that into you. So clearly he's been able to work with someone like Phil Snow at Temple, the defensive coordinator, and take and apply that coaching. And then there's just the actual vertical leap piece of it here as well.
Yeah, it's a great point to make for sure. I mean, it's nice to be able to show people where there are instances of a player who obviously has received coaching and is performing that well. So, okay, looking at our next play, I believe he's at the bottom right at this juncture.
Yeah, so this moved into a category where I wanted to talk about how he finished the play in areas where he needs to continue to work on things. So we've got another, 3-point stance, explosive upfield get off here. He's going to attack this tackle from Memphis. He's going to beat him to the spot, which is what he's supposed to do here, which is excellent. And then what happens after that, right? We're looking for the ability to not just beat the tackle, you're looking to impact the quarterback as the pass rusher. So how does he impact the quarterback in this situation? Well, again, we've got, awareness. My apologies, I'm looking at the wrong notes. He's stacked here. He's the spy. He was not the bottom player getting off. He's stacked
that's
as a
right.
spy. He's stacked there as a spy below the linebacker level, and he's keying a mobile quarterback.
There we go.
And so as this quarterback feels the pressure and steps up, you'll see 7 come to close, and you see that arm fake, and he buys into it and flies by. So as the spy here, his role, if the quarterback looks to escape, which he did, he is supposed to secure that player. That is supposed to be his play done at whatever the point of contact is. Well, right here at the 49-yard line should be the point of contact. He did not secure his play. And there's a couple instances on his tape where his aggressiveness into this may cause this issue. The other potential cause for a player flying by these are those that are stiff and just can't bend and actually change the directions this late in the game. Once they have that head of steam, they don't have what we call high speed change of direction. So one of the things from a player like this is you go into a combine setting or any private workout or pro day is to actually try to figure this out in a different format. So clearly, we're having a question here on tape. He doesn't close well, take the proper angle, and finish this play. Again, we see this a few times on his tape. Is that simply because he's just aggressive and he's flying in here, thinks he's going to get him at one angle and he misses? If that's the case, you can coach that, right? If he's just over aggressive, we can coach that and continue to work on it. If he doesn't have the ability to sink his hips, stop his momentum, and change directions in the open space, particularly as a stacked backer, that's a severe question and a limitation that's a lot harder to fix, if ever, especially with the timelines these players are under. So again, when people talk about, well, the combines and the pro days are not that useful and what have you, they don't build these things into the calendar because they have no function. Right? They don't spend the time away from their families in Indianapolis because they have no function. I would argue the proper use of these situations is to say, okay, here's a question on tape. I would like to see if he can change directions. We have drills that can validate that. Put him through the drills. Let's see if he can change directions. I feel like after seeing him at the combine, that was fine. He checked that box. This is no longer a concern for me. I believe he's an over-aggressive player coming to the point of contact.
Yeah, so for the most part, I mean, I would probably argue that the combine and pro day workouts are really meant to be used with a small brush to make really fine, strokes, as opposed to a broad brush that you're going to slap paint across a barn with.
Sure.
And I think that sometimes what happens is that we see the ham-handed approach of a very broad brush. When discussing these types of workouts, and it's limited to one number or how one number works or one exercise works, as opposed to really talking about how a combo of exercises or a single exercise can talk about one or two things specific to that player. So if you don't mind, who are some players that you've witnessed in the past or have observed who may have been over aggressive, who have been coached out of that?
I think that's something we had in Philadelphia with Brandon Graham at a period of time. He came in with high expectations. The early part of his career, the trajectory was not looking good. I'd argue that he hadn't taken care of his body at a professional level like he should have, and so, but he wanted it. He wanted it when it came to being on the field to be successful. So you would see a guy like that really trying to go out and prove himself, and trying to make every play and do everything. And as he refined his body, and he really was able to move better, like he exhibited in college. But secondly, started to realize that he was one piece of a larger machine. And that adage that Bill Belichick's always talking about: do your job.
Yeah.
If you do your part and the other 10 guys do their part, this will work. And sometimes players have to understand that they're one piece of that larger machine, and that as soon as they leave the scope of their responsibility, particularly in this case where he misses, if that secondary player, if number 8's not there to clean this up, that quarterback's out for plus yardage, and we're moving the sticks. Yeah. This is 3rd and 4. So this is not a situation, not that really any play is a situation where you should be missing tackles, but this is a critical down and distance to get off the field, particularly this yardage, because this is not field goal territory.
Yeah.
For most programs. So, again, just to kind of calm him down, pare him back, and get him to trust that he's, a piece of a larger machine, and that he doesn't have to do everything. And sometimes these kids, whether it's through coaching, I've been around coaches that really push a premier player to do it all to make their life easier, because the other guys can't hack it, or just a lack of trust. Yeah. In other players around you, that other guys have not done their job, therefore I need to do more. I've seen both of those be true. And so again, when you get him around other players who are all competent, and you, like I said, you get him to kind of pare back and play within himself, a lot of those issues can be alleviated.
That's an excellent point. It's that whole, I joke around, it's kind of like don't be a hero syndrome, don't be a hero. But the way you described why that forms is such an essential point to remember. It's not just that these guys are bad kids or something. It's that these guys, it's a learned behavior, whether indirectly, unintentionally learned or intentionally put into them. So
Absolutely.
those are good points. So let's go on to our next play here.
So he's stacked actually over the Y tight end here to the wing side, down at the bottom. Squared stands, looks like a little bit of an inside shade maybe on that tight end, which would put him in the C gap, which is the space between the tackle and the tight end from a defensive responsibility here. And we have another situation of him, again, not consistently playing within the structure of a scheme and putting himself into a position where he's trying to do more and arguably negatively impacting the defense.
Yep, not maintaining that gap at all.
So, again, the staying inside of the tackle, again, if he's got the inside shade and he's a C gap player, that's fine. But if they got a pin pull scheme here, the tackle 72 goes down. We've got an interior player wrapping around. He needs to collision that interior player. There's very few schemes that want to get that many numbers on the outside. So again, and this is we talk about these plays, we're trying to understand what they can and cannot do, right? That's our objective here. And clearly we're seeing a play where he doesn't hold integrity. That doesn't mean he's a bad player, but it puts up a flag, something to study. Does this continue to happen? And there are situations where this continues to happen. He's flowing. He's getting pressed down. His eyes are in the backfield. He's continuing to flow to the mesh point. The thing that he doesn't quite recognize here is that play is coming outside of him. So while he's attacking the hash mark, the play is coming to the numbers.
Yeah.
So he's not going to get there unless he stays vertical, collisions the interior player, bubbles this thing, makes that running back completely go to the sideline so that he can't gain yardage. Again, these are things that can be coached. You can teach him to do this, but these are one of those things when they talk about, what do you talk about in the room in Indy? What do you do when you get him in a private workout or you bring him for a top 30 visit? I put this play on and I walk him through what was your responsibility? It's 1st and 10. What were you thinking? What did you learn that week? And don't get me wrong, not everybody has the recall to do every bit of this, but I want to unpack this play with someone like Haason here and try to understand how much of the game he presently knows. Because if he knows what he had to do and he doesn't do it, we can unpack that. If he doesn't know what he needs to do, we can unpack that. But we've got to get to some kind of root cause analysis on this. Because again, these are plays. Just watch the sheer numbers as this play continues. Because again, he's attacking the hash. He's out of the play. He's washed down by the tight end. Running backs in space, and look at the numbers. I mean, you got linemen downfield on corners and safeties. If this running back has a little higher level of ability, who knows what this play could be for Memphis?
Yeah, and it's this whole play comes down to understanding the play and knowing what to do with your athletic ability on it.
And this is, one of those situations where, Phil Snow, who's a defensive coordinator at Temple, they've put a lot of players in the NFL recently, despite the status of that kind of program, and they've been well coached.
Yeah.
So this is not a situation where I automatically believe that the NFL coaching that he's going to receive is so vastly superior to what he's received
right.
that he's head over heels all of a sudden be a better player. Don't get me wrong. There are absolutely coaches at both the college and the pro level that are not maximizing the abilities of their players. That happens. But there are also coaches at both levels that do.
Yeah.
And so, this assumption of linear progression that, okay, now he'll get an NFL strength program, now he'll get with NFL coaching, and magically he'll be 10 times better than he was at Temple. I don't know that to be true unless I take these plays, these opportunities to unpack with him and potentially his coaching staff,
right,
how they've taught him to do things so that I can measure how well he executed what they taught him to do.
Yes. Excellent point. All right, and our next play up at the top of the screen here against the left tackle, 2-point stance.
So now we're talking back to be a rusher here. It is 3rd and 1. Clearly at this point in the game, based on the formation, and my guess is just what they know of Memphis's offense, they're not afraid of the run here, just looking at how everybody's playing. So this is pure pass rush here against this tackle. He's coming from a right defensive end position.
See a little head dip to the inside. Kind of arm over to slap down on the reach.
So when we talk about a pass rush plan, he's exhibiting a couple things here that get you excited. As you noted, You see a little bit of an inside stutter to try to get the tackle to stop his feet. So that's good. So after his initial burst, tackle setting high, readying for speed, a little subtle step inside, get that tackle to stop, soften the edge. Now he's coming and he's working to kind of club and clear the hands to get to the edge. Right now, look at that tackle.
Yeah.
That tackle should have no chance to beat him. If he can corner and finish, he should have a direct path to the quarterback. There's literally no object standing in front of him. Here's my problem, as I see too often with his game. That tackle's in a terrible position. All he's got is one hand on Reddick's back, and watch what that one hand on his back does to his path to the quarterback.
Yeah, it's blown up.
So it wasn't a matter of did he have a plan, did he have the burst, did he get to the edge of the tackle? He clearly does. You paused it perfectly right there. That tackle's gone. His hips are not in position, his feet are not in position. Any offensive line guy with their salt tell you that guy's toast. Okay, so he did his initial part of this rush. Now the phase of pass rush that I think it's too often somehow overlooked is beating the tackles is absolutely a piece of the puzzle. Your job is to impact the quarterback. Does this quarterback ever get impacted in terms of their ability to flow through their work? Did their feet get way out of balance? Did they have to drastically move? I mean, this quarterback has perfect opportunity to hitch up and deliver whatever ball they want, because he's just getting pushed by as a high side rusher. And when you watch the quarterbacks in the league, when you watch Drew Brees, he does this all the time. He loves the high side rush. Please go by.
Yes.
Let my tackles just wash you by. Zach Strief, no one's putting him up there as the most fleet of foot tackle in the National Football League. Zach Strief is amazing at protecting the inside, making a guy go over the outside, and Drew just steps up and delivers a ball. So if a Reddick's going to be put in as a pass rusher, then something has to be addressed here in terms of when he gets to the hip, boom, he wins the hip. Now, how are we helping him get to the quarterback? Because this is where we talk about cornering, and you're drawing the line right there. You can see the arrow. You got to flatten that angle down. You have to understand where you need to come to get to that quarterback. When you talk about pass rushers, we talk about pass rush lanes. So if you're rushing with three, which is what I believe I see here.
Yes.
The outside two rushers are each taught in most systems to get to the outside hip of the quarterback. It's called a contain rush. And then the interior rushers are taught to get to basically the numbers of the quarterback, right? And you want to press him in his face. So the guy can't escape outside because the contain rushers are there. The interior rusher presses him in the face so he can't stud up. That is a collapsed pocket. That quarterback should not be able to do their job if we do our job effectively as rushers. Well, again, if his job is to get to the hip of the quarterback, anybody watching this, does he get to the hip of the quarterback as the rusher here?
Yeah, not remotely. And you're not seeing the ability, or at least on this play, you're not seeing the ability to really get his hips turned or really sink in a way where that he's able to make that flattened movement.
So again, when we talk about what we're going to do with him in the NFL, I've seen plenty of projections for Reddick as being a stacked backer who's going to rush on third down. Okay, I'll play with that projection here. Then a rusher on third down, if he's going to be an edge rusher, he's supplanting then one of your two primary edge defenders or defensive ends. Right. If he's stacked on first and second down, then somebody else is playing on the line of scrimmage. So whoever that individual is either to be taken off the field or being pushed inside to be an interior penetrator so that we can still leverage Reddick here on third down. So if he's supplanting, then I guess we're also saying that he's going to be a superior rusher on the edge, which again, to me, we need to make sure that he's getting to the quarterback. So, when we get this player in the private workouts and the settings, I'm going to work him through bending and cornering drills till he's blue in the face, because I want to make sure he can flatten under stress.
Yeah.
I'm going to have someone pressing on him and work around. You see, we talk about pass rushers in this class. Watch Myles Garrett go against Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson's a 320 some odd pound offensive tackle. There's reps where Cam is basically laying on Garrett's back, and Garrett is still cornering at full speed.
Yep.
And it's just it's not something many are born with in terms of gifts. It's unbelievably hard to train and develop, and this is the situation where that becomes really important.
Yes, it's a great example, and I believe our colleague John Owning did a film room on him last year with me, where we actually watched that play. Was it that last year or this year that he did it? I thought it was. I don't know if it was
He played him again
this year,
this year, and
so
it
it
was
might have been
right
this
off
year.
the ankle.
Okay.
So people were discounting that as it was related to Cam's ability to stop Garrett.
And just another point is before we move on, the point you made about Drew Brees, who loves to climb on pressure here. If you're someone who's interested in seeing an example of that, I would watch him against Denver last year. There's a play, there's a few plays, but there's one where he hits a pinpoint pass, probably about 45, 50 yards downfield, where he has to climb the pocket that way, and it's a very tight pocket. And one of the things that makes him so great among so many others is his ability to do that in tight traffic and make that pinpoint throw. He's one of my, from a deep ball standpoint, there are a few that are better than Drew Brees, and especially because of the fact that he can make those types of plays, on the move, under pressure, resetting and firing. To me, it's like, that's great, you can move, but if you can't reset and fire and do it accurately, then what's the use? So,
Sure.
All right, back
Everybody
to
can see the circle down here.
yeah.
3rd and 2. So he's the primary edge player here. Again, the traits that, again, we talk about things that need to be coached versus things that cannot be coached, or at least coached quickly. His ability to attack upfield and gain ground, you can't take it away from him. And so, again, we look at a tackle that is not in position. This tackle could not match feet and angles in terms of reaching a landmark against Reddick here. Now, that said, I don't know if this Cincinnati left tackle will be playing in the National Football League,
Right.
and Joe Thomas can meet you at that point. So, again, we start trying to understand how transferable this trait is. Again, in that context to the level of competition, the level of competition doesn't necessarily just mean school.
Not at all.
We could see, for all I know, this tackle could be the number 5 overall pick in the draft next year. From this rep, I don't believe so, but he could be. So again, just because it's Cincinnati doesn't mean he's bad. But I want to look at this player for what the offensive lineman is related to the NFL. Like, is Trent Williams going to look like that? Is
Right.
Tyron Smith going to look like that?
Right.
The answer is no. Like, they would never be this open this early to give Reddick that kind of path. And they're going to know how to vertically set or 45 and be in a foot position. So now the burst is great to start the play, to get towards the edge. Now what do you have about clearing hands and finishing? And so here's a rep where he hasn't completely gotten to the backside hip of the tackle yet. Tackle's still in his chest. Now he's pressed out. The tackle's pressing him out. And again, as it relates to his impact on the quarterback, without the quarterback continuing to hold the ball, this is not a rep that's showcasing the finish moves of his pass rush plan. So again, as we look at the projection of the player, by no means can we take away his burst. He absolutely has those traits, and we've seen him compete. We've seen awareness from him. We've seen him move to a stacked position, which has been a little more unnatural based on his training. So, very exciting stuff to see from a trait perspective. But if we're going to say that he's one of my 2 primary third down outside rushers, I haven't quite seen that in the games that I've viewed to get really excited about that skill set translating.
Yeah, you're not really seeing the toes getting pointed towards the quarterback as he starts to turn this corner. You can see this one's not really turned.
Like right here, you'd like to see his left foot start to point right at the quarterback. If you're going to talk about flattening and cornering,
Yeah.
and you see, because of the pressure he's getting, that left foot gets kicked all the way outside his frame. He basically gets crossed over here because of the pressure on him. So I start to get a little bit worried about just his overall play strength in these situations, and his weight is a big factor in that. He's arguably giving up somewhere in the range of maybe 75, 80 pounds.
Yeah.
This player. And so one of the things that we get, is that the NFL scouting community historically gets nervous about with undersized rushers is these situations. Because again, it's not about the burst to get to the hip.
Yeah.
Clearly he has that. But it's what happens when he gets to the hip. Can he then go and translate and finish?
Yeah, and being able to bend is so important here, because if you're kind of stiff-legged the way he is here, even from the beginning at the top of the corner, you're not getting much ankle flexion, knee flexion, and being able to turn your hips so that you can kind of dig in here and be already in position as you dig in to turn that corner. And that's just not there on this play.
Yeah, not on this one. Like I said, it's two examples. I saw a couple more on film. There are clearly plays where he does get to the hip and the tackle doesn't get to him. He has had production as a pass rusher, but again, I start thinking about who he's going to be facing in the NFL, not necessarily who he faced in the American Conference. And are these things going to be, again, continually transferable?
All right, so let's go to our next play.
All right, so now we're talking about circling back and again finishing on the quarterback. We talked a little bit about um, his angles to close. Again, if we're projecting him back to a stack backer, he's going to have to play in space. He's going to have wide receivers, tight ends, running backs with him here. How does he finish? But before we get to that part, I want to start with how he starts this play. And you're talking about the strong side rusher here. He's to the tight end side, even though the tight end's offset, coming out of a 2-point stance, which again is harder to be explosive out of. He still does a fine job here. Another thing that people really like about Reddick, and it shows up time and time again, is that competitiveness and even some of his technical proficiency here. So he feels the pressure from the chip blocker here and club arm over, right? You see his hand still on the backside. It's perfect technique. Control the back of the outside shoulder of your blocker. You can either rip or arm over here. He does all of that to immediately disengage, get himself back in a position. Now he's squaring up. Now he's got the next blocker he's got to work on, but he also has vision on the quarterback. So he sees the quarterback step up, so he adjusts. Again, gets vision on the quarterback. Now we're closing. Now we're finishing. Right here, nobody between them. It's him and number 4. And unfortunately, number 4 escapes again. So again, going back, we saw this play earlier. There is something to that that showed up as a red flag for me. A lot of things about this play, right? You check off all the things in the list of all the things he did well in this play. And there's plenty of them. Some of the difference between quality NFL performers, guys that you can win with, and then the guys you win because of. The guys you win because of finish this play.
Right.
And again, if you come to the conclusion that it's simply because he's over aggressive, he dropped his eyes, he's lunging, he's trying to make a big tackle, maybe he's trying to strip the ball out, it's 3rd and 8, whatever, if you unpack it that way, and that's the conclusions you come to, again, you can get him to play within himself. You might see him start to finish these plays, which again puts him up another level. But if you start getting to the point here where, again, he can't sink, stop momentum, change directions at a high speed, particularly as a stacked space player, it continues to be a question mark and one that other teams will start to exploit. Part of the NFL game is that the opposing coaching staff and the opposing scouting staff work through your roster, identifying individual player strengths and weaknesses, and really good coaching will exploit those. And so if you find a guy that cannot change directions in space, I'm going to find a way to get Darren Sproles on him.
Right. Absolutely good points there. And it's, I love how you delineate, guys you can win with and guys who win for you, I think that was how you phrased it.
Oh, you go with a because of or win with.
Because of or win with, and you can see that with quarterbacking so much as well. I mean, we talk so much about, I would argue that Alex Smith is a guy that you win with, but a guy like Aaron Rodgers is a guy you win because of. And that may be a simplistic look at a very complex position, but when you look at certain plays, guys who maybe hesitate a little bit on the offensive side, where they need to let it go and and not try and verify things a little too long. It's kind of this similar to a player here who may be over aggressive at the wrong points.
And again, my concern about the over aggressive in the finish is a little more oriented to him, again, stacked space than it is to a pure defensive line projection. I don't want my defensive lineman to miss it either, but if his job is to impact the quarterback as a pure defensive lineman, he's disrupted this quarterback.
Yeah.
Right? The quarterback is scrambling, adjusting, trying to figure things out. Now, if we're talking about second level defenders in space, depending on the coverage, like if you're in man coverage and these situations occur and that guy gets away, we always talk about everybody's back's turned and everybody's running away from the quarterback. You know, you become that last line of defense. Like you have to make that play. And if we're projecting him to be a stacked backer, these are things that we got to have an answer to before we can feel comfortable drafting him.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful point about man coverage and incorporating the entire scheme into the mindset of what the player has to have, and just expanding that on a greater level in terms of beyond athletic ability and technique and how your job impacts your teammates' jobs. All right, moving forward. Now we got him in a 3-point off the left tackle here.
So again, the first thing that flagged me here is just stance. If you drew a line across his back, you know, his butt's going to be sloped down. This is not an aggressive pass rush stance. So one of the things contextually I'll do before I assess something like burst or get off is if you look at the D tackles, you can see the butt in the air. The end down here to the near side, you've already highlighted, more of a flat back. He has the lowest stance of anybody, but it's 2nd and 5. And if this is a team that's going to be running some of your read option plays and putting him in a difficult spot, you know, that stance is taught to work laterally, you know, continue to close ground between you and the tackle and then be able to work from there. So he's using the technique he's being given. That's fine. Before I go and I say, oh, well, he doesn't have burst, I want to look at the down and distance and I want to look at his stance. 2nd and 5 is a run and pass option down, and his stance is indicated that he's prepared for something other than pass rush. He might have to convert to pass rush later. We will assess that, but we don't want to knock a guy for, again, doing what he's supposed to do.
Excellent.
So again, here he gets the low hat run block read. And this is one of those times where the end zone angle is obviously so much nicer to have when available. But if you want to talk about one of the terminologies, hat and hands, I really prefer just hand placement and timing. He gets inside 72's arms and just watch the pad level of the tackle. Right. So if you want to talk about how the functional kinetic chain of an individual, when the technique is used properly, can unlock play strength. Again, we talked about the difference. This is the same tackle that had one hand on his backside and pushed him over the top of the quarterback. We talked about the 75, 80-pound difference in potential weight here. That tackle's right up and down.
Yeah.
And it's due in part, and I believe in large part, because Reddick properly stayed low, proper pad level, leverage, hand placement, then unlocks his hips. Ready? Watch what happens. Boom! He unlocks his hips, tackles right up.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about the idea of stack and shed? Well, this is definitely stacking a tackle. Now, the only thing I'd say is in most schemes, that guy's going to be taught to keep his hat more purely outside. You can see the linebacker coming down on the hash, who'd be the interior player. But again, these are the little things that you can clean up. He seems like a kid that's trying to do everything. Because you're going to see him here stack, press, get vision, and fall off inside. Well, if that running back breaks it to the outside, no one's going to be there because he's committed. And now there's 2 black jerseys in the B gap inside the hash here. So, again, these are the things you sit down with a kid. This is after you draft him at that point. You sit down with him, you show him all these plays, and you say, listen, you do this, we lose. You keep your hat outside. You jack up 72. Stay outside of him so that running back can't come there. Trust me, my linebacker will fill that B gap. We'll be fine.
Right. You don't want to do this against, you know, Jamal Charles in his prime, LaShawn McCoy. You don't want to do this against about, I don't know, 3/4 of the running backs in the league, really, veteran or veteran starter or even just first-tier backup.
Sure. But again, this is a play that shows plenty of quality traits in terms of take on.
Yeah.
Again, talking about projecting it. Okay, he's going to be a stacked backer. Well, one of the concerns with stacked backers these days is an inability to stack and shed offensive linemen. Not many of them know how to come down and put their hands on. Now, this is not a pure come from 5 to 7 yards, come downhill and stack shed while on the move. We don't see that purely, but we do see what can happen in terms of his play strength when he's in proper position. Like, it can look good, which gives me hope that we can coach him to continue to do that. And then the polish on this, the icing on the cake, is just keep your hat outside.
Right.
And trust the defense.
All right, so let's see what we have here.
This is another one that I think my coaching background grabs me again on this, because my guess is the vast majority of people finish this play and get really excited about how he spun inside and finishes the tackle. And he does. That does seem to look good, but this is now a fourth play in our 11 play series where he's started off outside this player, right? That was his gap. There's another blocker even coming to again put another player on the outside. So if this running back comes down here to the numbers, every black jersey is covered. The running back makes, in my opinion, a poor choice.
Right.
Brings himself into contact, and Reddick does spin in and take care of it. But this is, again, I'm clearly getting the sense from his film that he's trying to do everything. I've got to understand that before I select him. It doesn't mean he's a bad player.
No.
It just means he's trying to do everything. Now, at some point you're going to sit down with the coordinator, the head coach, a position coach. You're going to find out, is he undisciplined? Did you tell him to try to do everything? Did you just allow him to try to do everything? What was coming to these results?
Yeah.
Because if you get a guy like Troy Polamalu that you can't ever figure out how he gets it done, he just gets it done. Sometimes you work around that.
Right.
Most teams don't want to bend this, because Pittsburgh in LeBeau had to teach 10 other players how to play around Troy.
Yes.
It wasn't like any other defense in the league, because you didn't know what Troy was going to do. So 10 other guys had to kind of figure it out after the fact and react around him. Not every team is going to do that for every player.
No, you have to be special, unbelievably special for that to be the case. And the team has to be just as special in that regard to do it.
Sure, absolutely. And that's that blend of finding a right fit in a home for a player that is in this projection, this hybrid, doesn't necessarily have a perfect home type situation. Again, you need to know how your coaches can work with somebody and who they want to work with. If I'm going to draft this player, my coaches have to come to me and say, I want to work with him.
Yes. And this is our final play. I had a repeat of the second one here, so.
No, not a problem.
All right.
So now we're just getting an opportunity just to see athletic ability, and it seems almost like a nothing play. 2-point stance, 3rd and 3, explodes upfield, so pass rush snap. But again, just like he had the awareness to get up and try to stop the screen pass, he understands here that his responsibility in this coverage is, if they leak, I've got a flare. I've got to carry that. And you just see him bend and turn with that, which, again, we came back to those pass rush reps where he had beat the tackle to the hip.
Right.
We had questions about cornering. Here's an opportunity where you can see him corner at full speed. The problem to me then is not his ability to bend and corner. It's his ability to bend and corner under pressure.
Yeah.
Like when someone's physically pressing on him. So you better have a plan on how to soften that edge so where that tackle doesn't have a hand on your back. Because if so, then he's got a chance.
Well, this definitely was an enlightening episode about a player who, many are projecting big things for. And Dan, this has been fantastic. Are there any concluding comments that you would like to make about Reddick or anything that we watched in general today?
I get the sense of a smart, athletic, competitive, tough player, which are all boxes you want to check, right? Every bit of those would be exciting in a vacuum. My concerns are just simply, it's not a clear-cut piece. I think he's going to end up as a stack backer. I think he's going to end up on a stack backer more than anybody wants to admit, meaning I'm not seeing necessarily a 3rd down rush role where he's a priority player. I do think if you bring him as a blitzer in those situations, it's added value because he does know how to defeat blockers. So I'm not sure you're getting the year one production out of him. Maybe that you can get from other linebackers in this class. I think Zach Cunningham probably has more year one production. Again, the piece that gets interesting to me is if my coaches get done and they go, "This is what I need. I need a piece like this. I need a Sam backer in this day and age who's going to be on the line of scrimmage, who can do not the thump power Sam that we used to have, but the Connor Barwin type, where it's smart, athletic, tough, competitive, clean up pass rush from the weak side rusher that's coming to my side, know how to collapse the pockets, again, can cover the running back out when he flares, know how to get up and stop screens, can drop back in space and play stacked if I need to. You know, if you have a role for that guy in your defense, this guy really intrigues me. But if you're looking for a more clear cut apples to apples type guy, I could see coaches going, I don't know what to do with him. And if that's the case, I think as the staff, you have to decrease his value on your board to a later round where you're more comfortable taking a guy that we're just not sure of, but we hope if we can get it done. And you know you're going to lose him. Like if you put a third round grade on this kid, you know he's not going to be there.
Right.
He doesn't. My guess, he doesn't make it out of the first round based on the way he tests. But if your coaching staff doesn't believe in him, this is where it gets to be tough, because if they come back and say, I don't want to work with him, do you still draft him?
Right. You don't. I don't think you do. If you believe in your coaching staff, and that should be the fundamental thing you need to do at first, is you need to feel like you believe in them, because those are the guys that you're supposed to be delegating and working through. You know, that's my opinion, but you know.
No, and this obviously I don't want to go down a total philosophical wormhole, but this is where sometimes the scouts and coaches won't see eye to eye because the scout believes that he might be there through different coaching regimes. I've definitely heard scouts that say, I'm going to take the kid I think has the most upside because I don't know who's going to be coaching him.
Right.
And so that's their prerogative and their priority. And the coaching staff doesn't want to lose their job, so they're looking for different players. So when we talk about alignment from top to bottom, I don't buy this coaches coach and scout, and no one ever talks to each other, and we just hopefully we all cross our fingers and rub our magic 8 balls and it all works out in the end. And I also don't believe that it can just be the head coach and the GM in a room massaging out all the details. Yeah. If you're going to do this right, if you've hired a coach and said, this is the guy that's going to lead this team to the next level, and they built this staff to do certain things, doesn't it seem logical then to have a full extraction from them on the player profile to your scouting community to say, when you get into a situation where there's gray area on a player, we better be on the same page? Because again, if it's clear cut, if it's no brainer, no doubt about it, you know, everybody can use him. He's scheme agnostic. He's got everything checked. Well, yeah, no one's going to have a debate about that guy.
Yeah.
The debates come up on these players where it's not clean, where it's gray, and where someone in the room has to make a final call, but you have 30, 40 different stakeholders who have all committed hours and part of their life away from their families to this process. And do you just marginalize them?
Yeah.
You know, so this is where those battles come if you don't get ahead of them.
Yeah.
If you don't sit down ahead of time and explain what we're looking for, when these situations come up, they drive wedges in, not bring people together.
Yeah, trust and reliability and all those types of things come in the difficult situations, not in the easy ones, and that's the test of it. Well, you know, Dan, this was a fantastic episode. Once again, having you on is always a pleasure, and I'm glad that we're able to get it right today. You can follow Dan down below on his Twitter account here, and you can check out more RSP Film Rooms with Dan and I and other guests at the RSP Film Room on YouTube, and also my blog, www.mountwaldmanrsp.com. Thanks again, and I hope you guys enjoy the draft this year.